How's it going, everyone? Um, After watching It Follows and reading the Innocence from Keywords for Children's Literature, I was able to come to two different ways that I saw it and how both the film and the article kind of combine and clash. So I think to start out, I want to talk about how most of the time people will talk about how innocence comes from like being young and underexperienced or underinformed, right? But I think that innocence can kind of come from being more vulnerable. I think you're much more vulnerable when you're young, which I guess that's more of an opinion, but I do think that that's the truth. You're more vulnerable when you're young. You kind of you don't know any better sometimes. And I think that the article talks a lot about that. And kind of there's examples in It Follows, right, with Jay. So the first one I want to talk about is understanding how just being vulnerable in itself is kind of where innocence can come from. So I guess a lot of people think, and especially like younger people, like younger kids, children, right? Kind of right around that age, teenagers maybe, will kind of think that, just because you're young, like you're young and innocent, right? Like you're kind of free from harm, I guess, in a sense. And I don't think that that's necessarily true. And I think that in It Follows, I should say I know that it's not true. Being young and innocent doesn't protect you from any harm, right? And I think Jay realizes that in the film, and that's kind of where she begins to lose, I guess, a little bit of innocence because obviously like danger and stuff, just because you're young and innocent, you're not free from it, right? That's not like a shield of any sort. That doesn't protect you in any way. I think that, once you become more self-aware of your surroundings and realize that being quote unquote innocent or having more vulnerability than others doesn't really make you like free from the harm around you just because you're young. And I think that's something that Jay realizes, and it's a bit of a coming of age moment. And there's constant threat, and so being innocent isn't going to help you from that. So I think it's just understanding where the vulnerable ability comes from, and that the article talks about that, and just kind of watching how Jay goes about it in the film kind of just goes to show how that's true. Also, I think talking about understanding how, like I had mentioned, being innocent doesn't protect you in any way, shape, or form, right? If anything, maybe it could make it worse. So I think that a lot of people say that, like in It Follows, sorry, not a lot of people say, in It Follows, it kind of talks about how there's like no real adult figure in Jay's life, and kind of she realizes that has to look out for herself. No one's going to do it for her. And I think that's kind of where the innocence begins to fizzle out, and the more self-awareness begins to come in, because she kind of realized how vulnerable she was. And I think the article talks about that a lot, saying kind of how like when people are young, they don't understand, obviously, of course, just because they are technically underexperienced. But I think it all just kind of boils down to the vulnerability aspect. And I think innocence is a good thing when you're young, but being vulnerable is also a good thing. But you have to be self-aware of that and know once you get to a certain age that being innocent and vulnerable doesn't necessarily protect you from all the danger that there is. And like I keep saying, the film does a great job of showing that. Jay realizes that she has to do it on her own and look out for herself. Just because she's young doesn't mean she's free from harm. And I think that the article does talk a lot about that, saying, I quote this, mystifying the actual conditions in which children live is not necessarily the greatest thing, I think. And it's important to like talk about the real dangers versus just kind of like brushing them to the side, and helping kids kind of understand that they need to take care of themselves and look out for themselves. You can't just be all like super innocent and vulnerable all the time. You just can't, because God forbid, but there's bad stuff out there. So I think that kind of sums up my 2 points. It's just innocence isn't being young and dumb. It's just being more vulnerable. And once kind of some people can realize that for someone younger, or a younger person themselves can realize that, it'll really help them out. Thank you.